Okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Tesco's now.
Oh, all right.
Someone's not muted. They're going to Tesco's.
They're off to Tesco's. I'm going to mute you all.
Lisa.
Are we looking at a picture of the shed? Brilliant. Okay. What I wanted to point out first is when we look at this, is rather a mundane little reference photo. But the first thing we need to do is when we're looking at a picture like this is establish where the horizon line is. Obviously, you can't see the horizon line here. The horizon line is the same as the eye line. That's important to remember. If you can't see the horizon line, it's your eye line. So if I was standing at my shed door here, my eyes would be on the eye line, which is the horizon line, okay? So that's an important thing to establish straight away. As soon as we've got that eye line in place, everything else falls into place. So once we've got that in, we look for the basic shapes. So what we've got is we've got a box. Looking in 3 dimensions, this is going to be very crude. We've got another box down here. This flower bed is a box. We've got this tree is a cone. We've got a couple of little shrubs down here, which we're going to treat as spheres. And once we've got that in place, that is the basis of our drawing. What we need to realize as well is on the horizon, when you're looking at something obliquely like this shed is in perspective. So these lines going along here are going to disappear to what they call vanishing points, which always lie on the horizon line. These whiz down here somewhere. So all these lines are going off to the same vanishing points. So that is the basis of our drawing. Right, so if I swap my keyboard for my trusty little sketchpad, which you hope we've been playing in our sketchbooks. I did a little drawing of a back garden the other day. I hope you're all doing the same. I hope you're all keeping your sketchbooks busy. Right, so the first thing to do is to get that horizon line in. So just lightly, just lightly get that horizon line in, and then we're back to those basic shapes. So let's have a look. We've got the box. Now, I'm going to be posting this onto Facebook when this is finished, hopefully, if I'm recording the right screen this week. So if you can't keep up and you can't do everything as quickly as I'm doing, don't worry, because you'll be able to go along more slowly at your own pace. So that's our first box. We've got these vanishing points down here somewhere, but we're not too worried about that. So I'm going to quickly draw in those shapes. We're looking at the path. That path too goes off to the vanishing point down there. This is that box we were talking about. Oh, hang on one second. There are a couple of other little things that I'd like to point out. We've also got more shapes here. We've got a couple of cylinders here. These are worth noting. So that's pretty much what we're going to be laying out with our pencil. So what have we got? I'm looking here. We've got a sphere there. We've got a sphere there. We've got this tree, which we're going to treat as a cone.
Martin?
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt, but could you put what you're doing on the full screen, please?
What can you see at the moment?
I can see what you're doing, but just in a tiny little square.
Right, okay. Well, I'm struggling. I want to keep the reference photograph in the picture like that, Martina. So I can't really see a way around that. Is everybody else okay with that if we press on like this? Sue, tell us what you can see. I'm worried that you can't see everything clearly.
It's fine, it's full screen.
You're all right, are you? Okay, well, we'll soldier on then. Right, we've got our basic shapes and we've got these here. We're going to put these little, this is the box I was talking about there. We've got the fence, which is parallel there. We've got a fence going down there. So I am thinking I'm happy with that. I've got a couple of cylinders there. Look how crude this is. This is really quick. As I say, this is a sketch. This is a preliminary drawing. If we wanted to do something a little more involved, we could revisit this sketch and we could learn from it, and we can establish what our composition is to be like. And yeah, there's my eye line. There's where I would sit. I'm going to say that's enough for me to start painting. So I'm going to break out my paints. Got my swatch card so that I can refer to the colours. And I've got my trusty water brush, which is, if none of you are familiar with it, is a brush with water in the handle, so I don't have to keep dipping back into a jug of water. They're brilliant for sketching on the go, and they're brilliant for sketchbooks. Right, watercolours and additive mediums. So we start off with the lightest, and we always go darker. We can't get any dark. We can't bring back the light. We rely on the white of the paper for white. So starting off with the lightest layers. And that inevitably is usually a yellow. So the first thing I do is I get a nice wash of yellow down into my areas that are appropriate. So I'm looking at the lawn there, and I'm looking at these splashes of green here. The basis of all this is going to be yellow. So I'm squeezing my brush and making a nice puddle of yellow, because I'm going to be coming back to this again and again and again. So what I don't want you to do is just draw with paint. I don't want you to be drawing. We're going to be laying down swathes of colour like this. So I'm going to go in and wet this lawn. And the nice thing about wetting your paper is then you're then working in wet, and colours start to flow and bleed into each other. So look, I'm just going in where these swashes of yellow are, and I'm putting down my lightest tone. Then I'm going to come back into a darker yellow, because there's different hues of yellow in here. And this bush at the back in particular is more of a gold colour. So I'm coming in with some of this, and I'm establishing some of that there like that. And I'm dropping in, I'm creating a little bit of variety in here as well. Right, now, green. The subject is predominantly green. So I'm going in with this green. Now I'm looking at these bushes here. Now it's a pretty flat scene. There's not a lot of light and dark, but down the base and the back side of these little box trees here is going to be in shade. So I'm just going to come down and just darken off that bottom edge there, and here too. And I'm going to get this, I mean, this grass is currently yellow. It's not yellow, although there's an awful lot of yellow in there. I'm going to just blob some green in, and that's already starting to vibrate. There are 3 different colours in there, and that's starting to give it a little bit of emphasis. Inevitably, you need to have a nice wad of kitchen roll. These are great. You just squeeze and wipe, and that brush is now clean to go back into my second colour. This shed is quite a distinctive colour. I think it's quite a viridian colour, which is kind of here. And viridian's a colour that you don't use very often. So that's nice to get in. It's unusual. It's not a colour you see too often in nature. So it's going to be, I'm going to get some of that in there. Top of this shed is actually quite light. It's down at the base where it starts to get dark. And I'm bearing that in mind. So I'm putting in a wash of green over the shed like so, but I'm coming back into my colour, and I'm putting the dark stuff down at the bottom, because it's down at the bottom where all the darkness is, and the shade and the shadow. And I'm going to carry it across there, and then I'm going to introduce some of the green in here as well, because I'm going to mix it. I'm going to make lots of different greens. This shed, look, there's gold in there. There's all kinds of sap greens and what have you. And I'm just going to suggest the layering of the shed like that. Now this at the back is a really emerald green. So I'm going to mix up a nice thick wash. I'm going to get that background in, because that background is making the roof of the shed stand out. So I'm going to make that Viridian green there. I've got a nice green here. If you're working with a limited palette of colours, you might have to spend a bit of time making these up yourself. But I'm going to lay that in, and I'm going to use that colour to define the edge of this shed. And I'm just going to get a tone in there like so. Now, I'm just going to stop here because I'm going to develop that tree a little bit more. So I'm going to put my brush down and I'm going to grab my pencil again. And I'm going to start to create a bit of interest in this tree. Now, the tree is like a hand or a river delta or a root system. They're all recurring forms in nature. We'll look at trees later on in a further lesson, but I'm going to try and put some detail in this tree, and I'm doing it very, very simply and very crudely. And while I've got my pencil, I'm going to define some. I'm still working to these very pale guidelines that I created at the beginning. So I'm going to try and establish a little more detail. I'm going to get my door. I'm going to get the door in. I'm going to get my window in. Absolutely nothing wrong with bouncing around backwards and forwards between a pencil and a brush. There's no rules in a sketchbook. You can do what you like. It's always nice to get some atmospheric dots. Try and make as many different marks as you possibly can. Okay, I'm going to put this down. I'm going to come back to this pencil later on, but I'm going to try and develop a bit more colour, because at the moment we're all very yellow and we're all very green, and there are reds and there are rusts and there are all kinds of lovely colours going in there. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to work up a little bit of warmth. We're going to get a bit of red in there. And I'm going to pick out these terracotta pots as well. So I'm looking down here. I'm going to go with, I don't have a terracotta colour, so I'm going to use a nice red. Clean that off, come back into my yellow. And make a little bit of an orange there. Now with these pots, you can see the light's coming from there. So I'm only going to paint in the shadow, just like that. Come back to that later. I've got the edge of a brick wall there. Might be a little bit vibrant, that, so I'll pick that out. And then there are rusts in here. Right, so this is going to get really nice, quite nice and messy now. So I'm going to get there's a very kind of spindly bush over here. And I'm going to mix up a neutral colour. Now we all know that red and green are opposing each other on the colour wheel. So if I mix a red and green together, that's going to give me a neutral brown. There are lots of neutral browns in here. So I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to use this to lay down some of the background earth in here. The path. The path's maybe slightly paler and got a little bit of yellow in it. But look how quickly that's going in there. And I'm also dotting in like this to introduce little specks and interesting pieces of colour. That shed roof is a neutral grey. So let's just establish where that is. This front edge is in shadow, so that's the darkest piece. And let's get the window in as well. Just a suggestion. Right, I'm going to work into these bushes a little more. Down at the bottom is where all the shade is. So I'm coming in with shade here. A bit of a darker green. I'm coming back to this green now. This has got a lot of speck. This has started to dry off a little bit. So I can come in here and introduce pattern, which is important. What we're doing with these first wet washes are establishing some values. I'm coming in between the tree as well. Now, obviously, if I just painted over the whole tree, you're going to lose definition in the branches. So I'm just going to paint some negative spaces with this background hedge colour. So that the branches still stand out. I'm going to work up a little bit of brown. I'm going to try and redefine these fence panels again. Now I'm layering and layering and layering. The nice thing about watercolour is you can see the underlying watercolour coming through each subsequent layer. Right, I'm going to come back with this pencil and I'm going to try and define a few more details. Right, remember we were talking about this box? Let's get it in. Remember we were talking about these box trees? And the terracotta pots. And the trees, actually, I've just seen the trees got a really nice bright green trunk. So let me go back to this lovely bright green I've got here. And let's just try and get some of that in. Still lots of leaf litter in here. Lots of leaf litter actually everywhere. So I've got a really nice brown and I'm just trying to busy up. I'm looking at this shed again. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and give this shed a bit more depth. And I'm going to see, once you've got this wet wash down and it starts to dry, then you can go in with detail. And you can keep refining and refining and refining as long as you like. All these little lines go down to the vanishing point that we established earlier. It's always quite nice. I mean, this is cheating a little bit, but I want to try and give a sense of space and a sense of place. I always quite like to get a little bit of a sky in. And for a sky, I pre-wet the surface with my brush. Get a bit of nice pale blue. And just get a few hints of clouds in like that. Right, I'm going to try and get a bit more definition in this back hedge. Because down here you can see it's in shade, it's in shadow. And also it helps define the roof of the shed, like so. Now this, I'm sure you'll probably, some of you will be looking at this and think, what a mess. But it's a sketch and it's in your sketchbook. And if you wanted to come back and do a more measured observational painting of this shed in the future, you will already have done the groundwork. You'll have established where the perspective lies. You'll have established some of the textures and the colours. This is what a sketchbook's for, is for preliminary drawings. And so this would be invaluable for when you do a finished painting. By the way, I was thinking of contacting you all with the possibility of another class, like an Arty Improvers class. So I'll be sending you an email in the near future to see who might be interested in doing a longer 2-hour class, a 6-week class, just like we used to in Lunds. I'm going to be emailing you to find out who'll be interested in signing up for another Zoom class, but one where we can spend a bit of time and really investigate some of the issues that we're tackling here. So look out for an email coming. I'll be seeing who might be interested in doing a class. It'll be Zoom because it doesn't look like we're going to be getting in to real life in the immediate future. But it'll be a 2-hour class where there'll only be 8 of you again. There'll only be a nice little intimate collection of students. So there'll be plenty of one-to-one tuition and there'll be plenty of questioning and questions and answers. Now look, I'm going back in here to develop these branches here, the chaos of branches, and what we call atmospheric dots and dashes to really give a little sense of action. It's the same as splattering it with your paintbrush. You see a lot of that these days. People like to splash with their paintbrush. Okay, I'm trying everything now. I've got a little bit of a rubber here, so I'm just going to try and pull some of this back. Give that a bit more detail. Right, now as this is gradually starting to dry, I'm tempted to come back and add a few more splashes of colour and a little bit more interest. So here we've got these beautiful spots of leaves here. Now this is dry. I hope I can start to dot on here. Don't know how clear that'll be for you, but I can start to add to the chaos of this garden. And I can start to create shapes and visual interest. So I can start to add to the leaf litter here. I can start to put in lines. This is where I could also, now the background's starting to dry off, I could come in and I could work on it with pencil, coloured pencils. How are we doing for time? It's 25 past. I don't know if you're all going to just suddenly disappear after half an hour. You probably will. So maybe we should kind of call a halt to this at some point. And I'll answer any questions. See, if I had a little bit more time, I'd come down here and I'd develop. There's a little swathe of soil there. There's soil in here. I really kind of need to establish some more values, get these nice and dark. As soon as I put that in, that immediately just disappears back. This needs to be much darker, but I also need to leave the dots and splats and shapes of leaves. So I'm painting negatively around there. I'm just painting the shapes and the spaces behind these leaves. This is not, I mean, once you get to this stage, you can fiddle and you can play. You can't really overwork a painting or an exercise in a sketchbook, because it's all about learning and it's all about discovering. So you're not making, even if you think you're making what might become a mistake, it's not a mistake, because you're learning about stuff. You've just learned how not to do something. Right, it's 28 minutes past. I'm going to say, okay, well, that is just a quick little exercise. I could fiddle with this for a while and I could still start to discover what works, what needs doing. I can see there's a path that came out there that I've not really addressed. There's shadows, there's bricks, there's specks and leaf litter and stones and grass. I could play with this for a long time and still keep discovering what I need to do. I can get the trellis in. There's a rake there that I haven't even addressed at all. There's a trellis here that I haven't addressed. I can keep playing with this for a long time and I'd be learning, which is what Sketchbook's all about. Anyway, I'm going to quickly come out because I don't want to miss you all. Hang on. Hi. Right, I'm going to try and unmute you all. Have I unmuted you all, or can I unmute you all? Or can you unmute yourselves? And if there are any questions, let's have a quick Q&A before you disappear, because I'm worried you're just going to...
Martin, can I have your Facebook page, please?
Yes, if you go to my website, which is artymartin.uk, you can click my Facebook link there, and that'll take you straight there. So
okay.
Later on today, I'll let this dry, and I'll have a fiddle with it, and yeah, I'll put it up there. And if you've got any questions, just get back to me straight away, and we'll sort something out.